So where are people?
Terry's in Hawaii. Marjorie's in North Carolina. Patricia's in Brazil.
Mexico.
Oh, Mexico. Okay.
Close, sort of.
Oh, you know what? I got you confused with somebody else. There's another Patricia Aguirre that I know. Okay.
Mary's in North California.
Jesse,
Jesse's
you're in New Zealand, is it?
Australia.
Australia.
Yeah, Helen's in Australia too, crazy lady that she is.
And where are you, Marge?
I'm in Tustin, California.
Okay, just up the road.
Yeah.
So like Sandy was driving, when we were meeting in person, Sandy was driving down from LA to meet with us.
And thank you so much, Eloy and Tom, for inviting Terry to talk about what he did tonight. For me, it was immensely important, and I've never heard anyone else address it as clearly as Terry did. And it's so wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks goes to the whole leadership team. There's
Yep.
Jerry and Kathy and Liz too. So, well, what do you guys want? Do you get breakout room sound good, or do you want to just stay in the
Let's stay here, see what emerges.
Yeah, right now we have 27 people, so probably could stay. People, you're welcome to weigh in verbally or in the chat.
Now, don't forget to donate if you can, right, folks?
Yes, thanks,
yeah, that's
Terry.
new. It's brand new that we used to meet in person and we get donations in person. We haven't asked for anything or been set up to do anything since we went online in March. So
yeah, I think it goes to defray like the cost of the meetup site, and I think we also voted to donate some to our speakers.
yeah, that's still in discussion. So
Oh,
yeah. I think I'd like,
Or it's up for discussion. Yeah.
How long have you been meeting as a group?
since 2001.
oh.
A long time, but it's evolved over the time and changed with the leadership and all that stuff. So
20-year anniversary this year.
yeah, that's right. I don't remember what month we started in.
Well,
That's kind of cool.
you
Yeah,
continue,
Griselda, we'll have a recording. I'll get that to you.
I hope you continue online even after COVID.
We plan to. We had already started doing hybrid meetings with Zoom and in person. It's a little trickier, but we were doing it. So, and we're probably more skilled at it now than we were then. So,
Most definitely.
Well, speaking as somebody who's sort of out in the middle of the Pacific and feeling very, very integrally lonely on occasion, it's been great for me to pop in with you folks. So I really appreciate you being there and not like 12 hours ahead or behind me. You know? I can't do what Helen does, get up at 2 in the morning. I really can't.
or stay up till 2 like Finley did.
Does anybody know if this history is being recorded anywhere? Because sometimes when you're sitting at the edge of history and looking at it unfold, you don't recognize its significance until later, and then the details are lost. And I think we were all alive at the most unbelievable time in history to witness the unfolding of these maps. And I'm sure people know details randomly, but does anybody know if this is all being recorded somewhere? It's like watching the provenance of some really amazing deep insights and consciousness shifts coming into being as we're alive.
Are you talking about the history of Integral?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think that's a really good point, Sally, and I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's really worth investigating.
Yeah, and there's a few other threads too, like the spiral dynamics groups and and all the stuff that all the other people are doing.
I mean, Ken himself has spoken in great detail about the provenance of his thinking, and he often recognizes where he was influenced and how he gathered his maps together and stuff. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that's coming on board that, you know, there was the first wave of this with Ken, and then there was the second wave of some teachers, and now all these maps are being applied in different ways. And it's fascinating watching emergence in front of our eyes.
I think that Integral Life Institute, or the Integral Life website, they brought in a lot of the other stuff. You know, they brought in a lot. I don't know that it's a history of it, but you know, there's a lot there that's not just from Ken Wilber, but it's from a lot of other people too.
Yeah, that's another thing we're involved with. Is we got a group subscription to Integral Life, and so I don't know the price is gonna go up, and I don't know if we're gonna continue with that group thing, but I've been like just paying for it and then having people chip in if they want to join in, and then they can get to everything except the courses. So that's another rich resource, Integral Life.
I understood that if you were in Integral Life before, that you're grandfathered in at the old price, you won't be affected by the new price that once
Oh,
they,
that'd be good.
yeah, that's the way I understood it.
Yeah, me too.
So Larry and I were reading, but part of the role I'm doing these days is I'm getting involved in the Association of Transpersonal Psychology to try to see if there's a path to heal the rift between transpersonal and integral. And Larry and I were reading some of the old journals when Ken Wilber broke out of, and what some of the dialogues were back then and why he broke away from it. And it's kind of interesting seeing what they were fighting about. Like one of it was transpersonal psychology didn't mind pre-trans fallacies, and that would drive Wilber nuts. The second was they didn't have much of a developmental focus, and you know, they wanted Wilber to go through the traditional academic process of having everything vetted, and Wilber was just way too prolific. I mean, he was writing stuff and publishing books like crazy. So we'll see. Is one of the board members was here tonight, George. I don't know if any of you saw him or.
I talked to him.
You
Hey, Tom,
did?
can you do a thumbnail explanation of the pre-trans fallacy for a couple people here?
Sure. And Larry, please help me on this. So it's the mistaken interpretation that a view or an experience comes from a higher order like empathy and understanding, when it's really just more mythic and not realized. Can you help me with that, Larry, a little bit?
Yeah, it's just, in a nutshell, it's mistaking the lower for the higher and the higher for the lower.
Yeah.
Is that too much of a nutshell?
We had
No,
Jeremy
that's great.
Johnson on. We had Jeremy Johnson on talk about Gebser, and he doesn't have a hierarchy or no developmental. He was before all of this, and he talks about all the stages are present at the same time. There isn't a linear development in his model, but he certainly allows for higher, well, he doesn't call them higher, but where we are more access to the integral ideas with our own personal work, but that it's all accessible to us. And the Integral Christian Network that Mary and I are part of, and there's someone else here just in that too. It's all about, there's so much more to it in terms of even gathering stuff from the magic and the mythic, and seeing it differently, bringing it into our consciousness in a different experience, a different way. So we avoid that, but it still might look like that. But I guess all I'm saying is that I think Ken had a good reason to be upset with it at the time, but I think which the world has shifted, that the people coming out talking have made that more accessible. So in a different
I kind of understood it as having access to states after you've gone through the rational orange. So you can have access to these mythic and magical states, but if you haven't gone through the rational orange scientific yet, well, you can access them after that. So you kind of have both capacities at that point, or you only have access to one capacity, which
No,
would be the mythical magic.
That's one way to look at it, that you've done the growth and then you have access
Yeah.
to that in a different way,
Yeah.
how it shows up in our lives.
Yeah.
Well, if from integral, if I understand it, you could not have gotten to orange and unless you had already transcended and included everything before it. So you would have already experienced and included, transcended and included the mythical, magical by the time you got into orange.
Mhm.
One of the things that
Most people that I know don't like that at all. They reject
one of
it.
the things that attracted me to Ken Wilber was Spectrum of Consciousness in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And he talks about involution in Spectrum of Consciousness. However, he kind of juxtapositions it against evolution, and he's not as clear. And the interesting thing that to me as a Unity minister at that time was that the co-founder of Unity, which talked about involution and evolution, with involution representing the first chapter of Genesis, which is part of my book. And so involution, as understood in the dialogue, is very different than an involution as I understand it. You know, involution is like direct knowing coming from God. And it, I love to think of it as a Kundalini process. One current is going down, one current is going up, and both of them are happening simultaneously.
And in fact, they're not even two energies. They're one when you can know it from a non-dual perspective, but most people know it as one or the other. We're so experienced in terms of integral work and maybe spiritual work and being caught up in the eros energy, what I call getting up and out of our body, out of the world, into the divine space, or into the cosmic space, or into the ethers, whatever, doing a lot of spiritual bypassing. And which would be, in Wilber's terms, the evolutionary process following eros.
Yes.
And I agree with Wilbur, even though I think it's a misnomer to talk about involution as coming out of the unitive space into the dualisms that Wilbur talks about in Spectrum of Consciousness, you know, layers of dualisms. And we get, yeah, so I don't know why he calls that involution, because it's out of the unitive. So the terms unitive, I'm sorry, the terms evolution, involution are really from the perspective of humans, that we're evolving from where we are out into something evo, out. And we're really going closer back to the unit of space, in my experience, in following eros. It's taking us back to, it's like God exhaled, that was the involution, now he's inhaling again, pulling us back. And that's what we're calling evolution, or what the world calls evolution. And back to the pre-trans issue, I think Ken was mostly using it as that we mistake the lower for the higher. And we see a lot of people, especially when they get into metaphysics and they open up into some of these things, anything from crystals to pyramid hats to shamanism in a lower tier sense. And we confuse that with higher tier stuff, higher stage stuff, second tier in particular. And yeah.
Or it's all equal.
Oh God, yeah. It's all the same stuff, right? Well, in a sense, it is all the same stuff until you learn to see the differences.
I mean, I kind of saw that with this shaman that was in the buildings. This, you know, that was an interesting introduction of mythic magic forces right in the center of democracy. And I thought that was a wonderful thing to look at and absorb and see that within the center of democracy, there are forces that come in and display themselves. And where are those in us? That is so interesting to me. And why is this re-emerging, this mythic magic figure right in the middle of our sacred building. This was fascinating to me.
Because they canceled Burning Man this year, or last year.
That's funny.
Well, then that brings up another question. What is the shadow of Integral second tier?
Oh, by the way, so the guest we had last month, Namali, she was on with Jeff Salzman on the Daily Evolver, talking about the shadow of Integral. And I highly recommend that talk. That was especially later in the talk, but really good stuff on the shadow of Integral.
Especially later in the talk, because she does a beautiful job of making distinctions between teal and turquoise. I've never heard anybody and I make that number of distinctions, and it's a beautiful job. And I know from experience that you have to experience the territory of these distinctions to discover that distinction between, you know, teal and turquoise, and how there's different. They're not separate, but they're different from one another.
I remember, Barbara Marx Hubbard called it the wet-winged butterfly who has yet to learn to fly. So when entering into this higher consciousness, in the beginning, you're still a baby, brand new, and you're still a wet-winged butterfly. And then going into turquoise or whatever you would be, that you would then become the fully flying butterfly, so to speak. I don't know if that speaks to what you were saying.
Why not?
Another interview by Jeff Salzman that's real recent is one with Rand Stegan. And he and Brett Thomas were co-founders of Stegan Leadership Academy. Brett is pulled out of it after a while. But I was in a course with Brett Thomas early on when it was just beginning, and it, you know, all of this is part of the history. And I love something that Rand Stegan said, and he said that some integral people have come and gone through a year or two at Stegan Leadership Academy, and they leave. People that are there sometimes have been there as long as 10 or 15 years. And the reason integral people leave is because they no longer, he said, they tell me it's too hard to deal with the orange leaders of success. They're orange and they have some strong traditional Christianity, and it's like two different languages, and it's too hard. And he said, I always tell them, this is where the work is. And there is immense truth to that. And what we're seeing now in the polarized energy of our country reflects exactly that.
Yeah, that's why he was saying he practices in Texas as well, because physically that's where the work is. To change minds, and he talks and gets people, as Marge was saying, to be involved for decades and anticipate continuing to work with the same people for decades to come. It was, but spends quite a lot of time working with new clients at vertical learning, at horizontal learning. Right. It's only after on a 52-week program, and it's only just after they've done that they say, yeah, try and invite people to look at vertical development as well. It was really quite a fascinating talk, insights.
Yeah, Stegan was also saying in that podcast with Jeff that most people don't start to have a sense of a vertical transformation until like the 9th month or so, which is actually pretty quick. And I really appreciate when he said, because most integralists don't seem to get that you can't integrate the stages of the first tier. He gets that. And I'm sure he discovered it the hard way in his work, because there's been a lot of consulting firms that tried to do integral work, and they were trying to integrate the stages of the first tier. they're not integratable. They don't really want to have much to do with one another. The best thing that integral can do is understand that. And in Stegen's metaphor is like, let them have their own, they're all like in their own camps. And the best you can do is go into these camps and maybe work with them as they are, where they are, in their own understanding, not from an integral perspective, maybe be integrally informed, but not from an integral perspective, because they won't get it. They'll think you're nuts, especially at Amber. Orange to some extent too, because Orange is so much about self and strive, drive, and be all you can be, and make a buck and whatever, chase a buck. So I highly recommend like that interview as well with Stegen.
And it's interesting that Terry O'Fallon's work now in the very rare stages, and her 6.5 is the highest stages that she's been able to get research on. And it's the one that is immediately before the non-dual. I mean, we have so much to learn, and I'm so excited about it. And yet, there's so much lack of awareness, and I yearn to see more desire for people to learn how to love each other rather than bash each other, rather than argue with each other.
Well, for me, it was a big step to really accept that first tier really has to do it the way they do it, you know, hating each other, not all the stages, but it shows up more at the lower stages. You know, to hate each other, to want to fight each other. They don't want people to get along for collaborative processes to occur. It's more about competition and dominance and those sorts of things. And that's really a necessary function of those stages. And yeah, it's frustrating for integralists or anybody second tier, especially higher, to acknowledge, and Stegen was pointing this out, you know, how do you engage orange, or especially red, from an integral perspective, and get them to want to not do that? You know, it's like, no, you really can't get them to do that. This has been a big challenge for me, even in the integral community. Anyhow.
Sounds to me like we're making a discernment between integration and inclusion, because at the lower levels you do transcend and include up your way, you know. And then from the integral perspective at second tier, it seems like our task is to meet people so that the part of us that is red is a part of us that can relate and converse and have conversations with people who are at red. So we don't come to them from our integral, you know, expecting them to understand or meet us where we are. We have to meet them where they are. But we're tapping into the aspect of ourselves that is red.
Healthy red.
Yes, hopefully, yeah. But then again, if there is a shadow of integral, you're going to have some unhealthiness still around, you know. I would assume. I don't know.
Yeah, to me, it's using integral to look at, well, what's held them in red or pulled them back down into red, that they're feeling like they're having to fight for their lives. You know, you see it all the time in organisations when, you know, say it's announced there's going to be major job cuts and whatever. You can see people go down into survival mode. Well, you can address it. You can address it at that level to be understanding why they're at red. For instance, that's how I think you can use integral awareness to work with them.
I don't know if I would say that it's impossible for certain things to coexist. In other words, if you look at democracy, the principles of democracy are pretty high level, but they were coming from a very distinct lower level of slavery, ownership, and all of that sort of thing going on, and it still had to mature itself up to where we are now, which are still not not able to actually be who we say we are as a democracy. We're, you know, the principles are there, but we're not actually there. But those two can coexist. I mean, the democracy's been in place. This particular country of democracy has been able to hold on for 200 plus years, and now it's at risk. But I think that, you know, that it can get through this. I mean, it can survive. So that the two can exist simultaneously. The lower level functioning can exist within the higher level principles.
But anyways, now that we figured all that out,
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I'd be interested in hearing from some other people. Kathy, do you have anything you'd like to contribute? Or did she just leave? Saw her a minute ago. How about Mary? You're muted still, Mary.
I was just writing back to Sandy. She just told me that her computer died, so she dropped off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, wow. It feels like we're kind of jumping into different things that are all good. And I'll be digesting, I think, more before I will have anything that I can say that sounds formed enough. Although we did learn in one of our breakout groups that we really enjoyed the okayness of blurting things yet unformed, and that's okay too. I just don't have anything to add at the moment, and thank you.
that was a nice contribution.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love that notion of digesting. That's really helpful, actually. Thanks.
I want to acknowledge that there's a space here among us all that we're continuing to hang in here. And there doesn't have to be a whole lot being said. But there's this energetic that is existing among us all, that we're all in this and we're feeling this. Not that it's identical for each person, but we're here. And I'm wondering if there is something that's wanting to emerge as a we, as a collective. And my fantasy is there's maybe a lot of us waiting to see what's going to show up. And I invite us to look at how can we, and this is exploring, this is thinking out loud. This is not an agenda. How might we contribute to what's wanting to show up other than silence? I'm not saying that's an easy thing to entertain, but it's something that often plays out in my awareness, occurs in my awareness in these groups when I have several people together like we are now. And there can be a lot of quietness, which is not a negative thing at all. On that note, I'll just be quiet.
That's good, Larry. I mentioned somewhere in the chat earlier, but I didn't say it like I wanted to say it. But at the little Integral Life Practice Christmas gathering that Rob Smith hosted around the tree, it was a fairly small group, but one of the things he said, just know that if you walk into a group of complete strangers, you have brought the place into a higher, or I didn't say higher, you have made it more integral just by being present.
That sounds very metaphysical to me.
Like that. And I think that would, say again?
I said, that
I
sounds very
missed that.
metaphysical to me. Maybe a pre-trance thing going on there. It sounds metaphysical to me. Yeah, anyhow.
Or not.
I don't think
Or
so.
not.
I think there's something there because, it's so many levels that we communicate on, and there's so much subtlety that can flow. Just because we can't articulate the exact metrics or dynamics that unfold, I do think we have that experience of opening up space and transforming people. I know that happens in therapy a lot, is they're not going to keep that space open themselves, but just the taste of it for a moment, the one taste, there's something there. It's just that we don't fully understand it yet.
You just reminded me of the what Terry had mentioned, this phrase. I loved it so much I wrote it down: infectious forgiveness. So this experience of walking into a space and forgiving myself for my perhaps gracelessness or imperfections or quirky way of being or whatever, and my way of being is a permission, is an opening for everyone else that I encounter. So I think that sort of reflects what or that's sort of springing off of what Mary was saying.
That's and I told in our small breakout that there was an event that I went to that was the Meta Integral several years ago up in one of the Northern California universities, and I was a volunteer, and so I was there the night before it started, and they had a pre-committee discussion where there was this enormous table with all these books on it. Were you at that, Tom?
Yeah.
And these authors that that were discussing these things, and I thought, I am so over my head. But one of the things they said, the Englishman starts with a B or a G or something, the two thought philosophies they were trying to pull together, he had said it's important to have a base in person, and there was more to it than that, but what I thought, and that was that I can do. I'm here, I'm in person, I can be a base. I can't write these books, I haven't read any of them, much of what I'm hearing is over my head, but once I relaxed into that and recognized that I can do that, then suddenly there were these things, pop, pop, pop,
Yeah.
that came, some immediately and some later after I had digested it, that I was needed there too. And there was something good about being there, even though I'm not able to, I'm experiential. So I can't verbalize it in all those ways they could put it, that I might long to, but I was helpful.
Where was that? What was the name of that university? Sonoma.
Sonoma. I was thinking granola U, that's what they call it. But yeah, and we stayed in the dorms, and and there were a lot of good people there.
That was the these get-togethers later. Cook Reuter and Pascal. I don't know if any of you've seen Pascal on some of the Integral websites. He's brilliant. But we're doing shooters there, and I'm holding up Cook Reuter because she's getting drunk as shit.
Carl Beck was there. Is that his name? Beck? Yeah. And
Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck.
Yeah. Okay. I ran and got him coffee because he was ornerier than all get out and just wanted coffee.
Saeed was there with, I forgot his wife's name. Larry.
Elsa.
Yeah, she did a keynote in that gathering. That was a great gathering.
The brother sister team that was talked about tonight.
Terry Fallon
Kim and Terry.
Yes, they were there with wonderful workshops, and
You know, it's so interesting, Mary, because Marge and I, we were there too, but it's only when we met in Boulder then we actually really connected. So
Really?
that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. I remember in Boulder, that restaurant.
Oh, yes. And Marge scare.
And Sharona was supposed to come tonight as a guest of mine, and she didn't show. She hosted you in Boulder. She lives there.
Mhm. That's right.
That was also where the Love Stages
Hey, Lisa.
specialty inventory was birthed in a conversation. So that was an important weekend or week.
So we can be the bass. We can be like the, in musical terms, we can be the lower frequencies that provide the bass for the overtones.
Yeah, the whole on's at the bottom. Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, Helen.
Bye, Helen.
Hey. So, Judy and Marcia, does that help you out that with what Mary just said about stepping in over her head and
Yes, I found that that very helpful, and just the we space. I think the we space for me is something that I can experience because I am experiential as well, and through that, I will do most of my learning and and embracing.
One of the comments in the breakout room that I was in was that sometimes people get hung for what they say. Well, there's a spiritual precedent for that. It's called the person Jesus. And sometimes someone who has that high vibration of consciousness attracts people to them. And sometimes that same person gets crucified. So I think it's both what Tom is saying. I think it can be both and.
We also learn a lot from little teeny throwaway comments that we don't even think to say, we think they're nothing, but yet that's the thing that was really important to somebody. And I remember once I was going on to Don Beck about me and my kid and the problems I was having parenting. And he just did a little throwaway comment. He said, Red eats green for breakfast. And it was exactly parenting. They're a little teeny, and I was getting eaten, and I was moaning about getting eaten. And I just thought, okay. And then I had a whole path to go down. And I had a lot of survival energy to go down that path and not get eaten.
Don Beck came to Unity of Tustin multiple times and did whole week-long intensives. And one of the things he said to me one time was, Marge, the greatest thing you could give these people is to show them or give them some kind of a way of trying to figure out what kind of a church they need to go to. Not everyone belongs in Unity. They're not ready for it. They're not, and he said, someone needs to do something like that. That's a fact. I've never forgotten that. And of course, at the time I thought we were in a mode of wanting to grow our church. And I thought, oh, I don't want to send them somewhere else. But ultimately it happens anyway. And I think Don was exactly right.
That kind of generosity or apparent generosity really pays in the long run. I think of clients that I've had, and where there hasn't been a match, and I know it is, you know, on numbers of different levels, but even just this felt sense. And, you know, especially when I was early in my practice, I was frightened to say, hey, listen, you know, let me refer you to a colleague of mine, because I needed the money to pay my mortgage, you know. And I got to the stage where I knew it was best for me and them to move on without any sort of attachment, or for other reasons, especially. So.
It's like what you're saying is letting go gives us a lot, but we don't see it in the letting go because of kind of tearing off that bit that we're letting go of. Mm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But anyways, I like that phrase as a transition. But anyways.
I thought you were going to say that Tom, about the letting go versus the tearing off, and like was a wrapping up sort of a thing for tonight.
Yeah.
Does it feel like a good place to stop, or do you want to keep going?
Well, I want to just be cognizant of time. It's about 10 till 7 Pacific time for those of you who are local. I don't know if anybody needs to dash off, but that's where we're at.
Jesse, what time is it for you?
I'm doing good. It's 10:45 in the morning.
It's tomorrow already.
Sunday, yeah.
She's in tomorrow. Far out.
And Anna, it's that for you?
Yeah, it's 3:50 p.m. a Sunday.
Wow.
Yes, I'm almost a day ahead. New Zealand.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I want to thank a couple people. Well, I'm just going to take the mic here and thank Eloy for hosting and Tom for hosting. Thank Jerry for coordinating. He did a great job sort of planning our timeline tonight and set up the beautiful video at the beginning. And thank all of you for attending. I didn't think to say this sooner, so thank you all for showing up from all over the globe. I hope you all come back again. And yeah, and now we've got a website, so you can find everything, sandiegointegral.org. And next month, Saturday, is the second Saturday, February the 13th. We're having Terry Patten back again, so please come back and do that. Anything I left out, Tom?
No, that's great. Appreciate it.
And big thanks to Liz for putting up the website.
You're welcome. Yeah.
And I'm curious about whether Rasmus is actually in Copenhagen, in which case, what time of day is it there?
Oh, it's got to be 3 a.m. or something like that.
4 a.m. There we go. Yeah, he has a microphone and computer issue. So hopefully, Rasmus, we look forward to hearing from you next time.
I'm seeing you.
Yes, I'm seeing you. So he had typed that in the chat before. So.
Okay. So if you haven't taken my survey, please take it.
Oh yeah, you can put the link in one more time, Tom, if you want.
Does anybody have any questions about why to take it or whether to take it, or concerns about maybe you shouldn't take it, anything like that?
I am wondering if I'm a good fit for taking that survey, if that's what you're asking.
Yes. You've been in Integral for 1 year?
What do you mean by in Integral? I was first introduced to it probably in 2017.
Oh, you're good.
Matt Kreinhager, but only just through a presentation, and then maybe a couple times another presentation. And then just since I've been, he's been my coach, sometimes it'll come up in conversation, understanding it. And then I think I've been to probably 3 or 4 of your meetings. So since that beginning.
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay.
Cool. You got those traits of why you would possibly show up to learn about meta theory. So it's kind of fun when you know what it's about. There's an underlying trait that I'm proposing.
Okay.
Some of you know about that. They all know they can't say anything yet. So it'll be fun to take it.
Okay.
results are really coming out the way I thought, even more so.
Yeah, Emily, if you feel like you're burgeoning integral, or at least you're drawn to it.
Definitely drawn to it.
Okay.
And
Then,
sort of a, oh,
you know,
sorry.
if you've been engaging Matt for a while about this, yeah, I'd say go ahead and take the survey.
Exactly.
I'm online. I'll finish sharing my integral group. But did mom pick up?
All right, y'all. I guess we're wrapping it
Okay.
up. Thank you
Bye,
so
Mary.
much.
Good night, everyone.
We look forward to seeing you all
Thank
next month.
you.
Bye.
Happy New Year.
See you guys next month.
Happy New
Yeah.
Year.
Bye.
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 Yeah,
Aloha to everybody.
bye.
Bye.